As Freemasons, we can trace our roots back to the Stonemasons Guild of the Middle Ages. While modern Freemasonry has today evolved in a philosophical and, to an extent, a charitable fraternity, the ancient wisdom and moral teachings of these early operative Masons still form the bedrock of our craft. Now, there is no better document that sheds more light on the origins of Masonic thought than the Regius Manuscript, which is also known as the Halliwell Manuscript, or a poem. It's actually the oldest known Masonic document, dating back to an estimated 1390 CE, although that is quite disputed. The Regius poem does provide us with a fascinating window into how geometry, ethics, and spirituality intertwined to shape the essence of what Freemasonry would become today.
The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, Masonic authority, or craftsmanonline.com.
Welcome to the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast with your host, Right Worshipful Brother Darren Allett.
The Regius poem wastes no time in establishing the central role of geometry, opening with the words, "Here begins the constitutions of the art of geometry according to Euclid." For the authors of the manuscript and the Masons of that era, geometry was far more than this practical skill for construction. It represented a gateway to understanding the divine order of the universe itself. The great philosophers and mathematicians of ancient Greece, such as Pythagoras, Plato, and of course Euclid, viewed geometry as a sacred science that unveiled the hidden workings of nature as well as the cosmos. And by declaring geometry synonymous with Masonry, which it does in the Regius poem, it asserts that the craft of a Mason is not merely a trade, but a noble pursuit of wisdom and truth. The working tools of a Mason, such as the square and compass, are presented not just as instruments for shaping stone, but as symbolic keys for shaping one's mind, heart, soul, in accordance with the universal principles of balance, harmony, and rectitude. So it's in this light that the practice of Masonry becomes a means of participating in the great work of the Supreme Architect, bringing order and beauty out of raw matter, both literally and figuratively. To fully appreciate the significance of geometry, as it's mentioned in the Regius poem as well as in our Masonic traditions, it's important to understand geometry's place in the classical education system of the medieval period. Back then, the seven liberal arts and sciences, divided into the trivium of grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, formed the core curriculum for scholars and learned individuals. Geometry belonged to the quadrivium, the upper division of studies that dealt with the application of mathematical principles to various realms of knowledge. By situating Masonry within the framework of the liberal arts and sciences, what the Regius poem does is elevate the craft above a mere mechanical trade and imbues it with intellectual and spiritual dimensions. Thus, the Mason is portrayed as not just a skillful artisan, but as a seeker of truth and wisdom, employing geometry as a means of understanding the fundamental laws and proportions that govern the natural and moral worlds. And this philosophical approach to Masonry laid the groundwork for the transition from operative to speculative Freemasonry, where the tools and the techniques of the craft became allegorical vehicles for conveying profound insights about the human condition and our relationship to the divine. Now, the Regius poem does mark a pivotal moment in the history of Freemasonry. You see, it captures the craft at a time of transition from a purely operative guild to a more speculative and philosophical tradition. The manuscript's emphasis on geometry as the essence of Masonry reflects a growing recognition among medieval Masons that their work held deeper meaning and implications beyond the practical demands of pure construction. And as the poem relates to the perhaps mythical history of the craft, which traces its origins back to ancient Egypt and the biblical figure of Euclid, it actually weaves together elements of history, legend, and moral instruction. The story of the four crowned martyrs, for example, highlights the importance of integrity and fidelity to one's principles, even in the face of persecution or death. The charges and the regulations that are set forth in the manuscript govern the conduct of Masons, both on and off the job, and they underscore the ethical responsibilities that come with the mastery of the craft. Now, central to this ethical framework is the concept of geometry as a guiding light for right action and right living. You see, the Regius poem admonishes or warns Masons to live well, to love God and love the Holy Church, and to keep from sin and shame. And this echoes the Pythagorean idea of geometry as a path to virtue and spiritual enlightenment. So by aligning their thoughts and deeds with harmonious proportions and immutable laws that were revealed through geometry, the Masons at the time could aspire to a higher standing of moral rectitude and contribute to the betterment of society as a whole. And this is where the fusion of practical skill and intellectual inquiry, as well as moral instruction, set the stage for the emergence of speculative Freemasonry in the 17th and 18th centuries, which is where we trace our origins today. So as the operative aspects of the craft then began to wane, the symbolic and philosophical dimensions came to the fore, and tools were laid aside as implements of operative stonemasonry and were picked up as vehicles of moral instruction. And these tools and terminology were increasingly used then as metaphors for the building of character and the pursuit of wisdom, with geometry itself serving as the unifying thread that connected the physical, the mental, and the spiritual planes. Now, the Regius Manuscript does stand as a testament to the enduring power of relevance of the Masonic tradition, especially since it is over 700 years old, supposedly. So by placing geometry then at the heart of the craft, what the manuscript does, it affirms the deep connection between the practical art of building and the speculative quest for truth, beauty, and goodness. So then for centuries, this connection has inspired Freemasons to seek out those hidden mysteries of nature and science, to cultivate virtue and wisdom, and of course, build the temple that is themselves, the temple that is the lodge, the temple that is their families, the temple that is their work, the temple is everything around them. So then as modern Freemasons, we're the inheritors of this rich tradition, and we're the custodians or the stewards. Stewards is actually probably a better term. Custodian is the Grand Master. So then every time we enter the lodge and we behold the symbols of the square and compasses, as well as all the rest of our symbols and tools, we need to be reminded of the central role that geometry plays in our craft. It's not just a tool for measuring angles and distances, but it's the key that unlocks the secrets of the universe and the human soul. So then we need to study and apply the principles of geometry in our lives, both within the lodge and with outside it. And here we can contribute to the great work our ancient brethren did and build a better world for all. So let's embrace the lessons of the Regius Manuscript and the ancient wisdom that it contains. After all, it's as relevant today as it was 700 years ago. Let us strive to be true and faithful to the craft, to live light by the plumb and the square, and to spread the light of Masonic knowledge to all those who seek it. And in doing so, we're going to honour the memory of all those who came before us and ensure that the timeless teachings of Freemasonry will endure for generations to come.